Hey readers, I'm Aubrey,
And I'm Peyton.
and today we are reviewing Weyward by Emilia Hart.
Yes, so join us for the cup of coffee as we dive between these paper sheets. Let's do this. Alrighty, hey everyone,
Hi
welcome to a
guys.
book review. It has been a hot minute, but we are back. It's the end of November, so I feel like this book is perfect to review right now. So we are reviewing Weyward by Amelia Hart. Right now we are in our NS section. That's our non-spoiler section. We like to divvy up our episodes, so if you haven't read this book and you just want a brief overview, our initial thoughts and our star ratings, this is kind of like the cover of before we get into all the
The
juicy details. So we'll
soft
let
cover before the hard cover, some
exactly.
might say.
Exactly. We should call this like the paperback section. So anyways, so we'll let you know when we enter the spoiler section because we're not here to ruin your day. This book has been out for a hot minute and it's also been very popular, but this was our November book club book. And it's pretty rare that we review book club books, but I feel like this is a great one to review. It's really popular. Everyone knows about it. And I unexpectedly had a lot of feelings about it that I didn't think I'd really like it, but I ended up liking it. So Aubrey's gonna get us started with like a brief overview of the book to get you interested and catch all of us up. It's been a week since I finished, and I'm not gonna lie. In my head, I'm kind of like, I need a little help. So
Plot?
take it away,
All
Robs.
right. So, Wayward by Amelia Hart is the binding. Oh my god. The spine binding story of three women throughout different like timelines. It spans 5 centuries. We have Alpha, Violet, and Kate, and they are united by a shared connection to the natural world and the legacy of resilience passed down through their bloodline. They are a generational story, if you
Yes.
will. We have first and foremost Alpha. She is our girl in 1619. We're going way back to a story you've heard before, because she faces trial as a witch in a small English village, and she is accused of murder and bound by fear and superstition. This is your like I feel like her story was the cornerstone for like you know what the Salem witch trials are, and even though we're not in Salem, like you know what witch burnings were of the time. But it's very interesting to be in her perspective. Then we're going to jump way forward to World War II era because in 1942, a young woman trapped in a stifling aristocratic household discovers her mother's mysterious secrets and begins to yearn for freedom. That's
Yes.
our girl
Young
Violet.
Young Violet.
And so we can kind of see what life is like then during these like 1900s era. And then we'll jump forward once more for our third timeline. In 2019, we have our girl Kate, and she is fleeing from an abusive relationship to the remote Wayward cottage where she begins uncovering her ancestors' hidden power. So that's kind of a lot.
Yes. Yes.
I
There's
think
three people.
so. We read this for a book club, and so we section it off into fourths, and we read a fourth each week. And the first like week of reading this, you're like, okay, I have a lot of different POVs. Amelia also does something interesting where each POV is told in a different, like, actual, like, writing POV
Yeah.
perspective. So Alpha's story, who is our not Sa- I keep wanting to say Salem because it
Yeah,
just
but
feels
like that
natural
era
as an
of like the
American.
witch trials, like the
But our
OG.
1600s witch trial girly,
Yeah.
she is told in first person. Then Violet's story is told in third person past tense. And then Kate's story is told in third person present tense, which is a rarer combination to be in third person and in the present. So,
Yeah. 100%. Um, so I do want to jump into like some themes of this, but also some
yes.
trigger warnings. So, like, this book really centers around female empowerment generational trauma, and then of course the like fantasy element is their connection with the natural world, and it's
Mhm.
something only this line of women have. So and then once again, I also want to get in the writing style. The writing style is very lyrical, but we'll get there in a second. So trigger warnings, because this is
Yes.
a novel about female empowerment. There are some, and I did mention generational trauma. Trauma. There's a reason why there is trauma. So
Yeah, and it's
there's yes,
explored explicitly on the page.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. I will say for the trigger warnings, I know a lot of our girls at book club were nervous going into it and then had a really positive materials with it. Materials had really positive reactions to the material. I think Amelia Hart handles all of these. I mean, we have violence, we have sexual assault, just to name two within there. I think she handles it with care, but it is something to like going into.
You should.
It's not sugar coated.
No, it can be vulgar at times. Like I said, and this is part of the writing style in her prose, is she does have this sort of compelling way to access those emotions. I don't think like I even accessed in my own brain and heart. And so once again, I felt like it was tastefully done.
Mhm.
I don't think it was like this trauma porn, throw it on a page because we need to like have that gut punch to the reader, but nonetheless, it is written in a way that is incredibly compelling and hard to read,
Yeah.
especially for someone who has experienced those things. So I just want to let everyone know that they are present. And if that is
Mhm.
something that is triggering for you, proceed with caution. I just think that's really important. But with that being
Yes.
said, the writing style, as mentioned before, I usually don't really like this like
Like
high.
flowery language?
Yeah, I don't know, like it's when it kind of feels more like Shakespeare at some point. But
Mhm.
I think she was able to root it in this like modern um like sense that felt
Okay, yeah.
comfortable to be in the story. I both listened and physically read this book, and I will say, when I was listening to it, I got lost. When I was reading it, I was like, "This book's great." I was
Yeah.
really in
It's
it.
one you
So
need to read to appreciate, in my opinion.
yes, I definitely recommend not listening to it. I recommend reading it. And I'm like all for audio books, love audiobooks.
Mhm.
I just think this one in particular, and one other book I could probably think about with the same effect would be Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. It's just a book you should read.
Yeah.
Not because
To
I'm like,
sit
"You
with.
should read this, not listen." I mean, like, no, seriously, I think you'll enjoy it more if you just read it than listen to it. Take it from me, who, like, loved this book. I didn't really like it when I listened to it in the first, like, 2 weeks of book club. Once I
Yeah.
switched over and started actually reading it on the page, I was
Mhm.
like, "Ah, this is great." So, that's
Yeah,
just
you,
what
like,
I
need to
said,
be immersed, you need to appreciate, you need to have that intention. It's
especially all
less
the
of, like, a
characters. Yeah.
entertainment story, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, exactly. And it helped me keep because we go through three different POVs, which is like
Yeah.
I usually hate, by the way. If you've been a long time listener of the podcast, I hate dual POV, let alone three of them. Yeah, like triple POV, like come on. But no, like I think reading this, I was like, yes, like I was excited for every time Alpha, Violet, or Kate came up. I wasn't like, oh, okay. No, I was excited all of their perspectives. So writing
Yes.
style is whimsical yet deep yet
Mhm.
lyrical. It's just like it's amazing. I really and this is her debut, everyone.
Which is
Like we can't
wild.
even compare it to like oh she wrote that. No, like this is her debut. This is where she's starting at. Like I just think
Yeah.
that's great. But
And I think the prose, you were kind of mentioning it, it feels very grounded, in which some authors like Olivia Blake, I love her stories, but her prose is elevated in a way that feels pretentious.
Right.
at times,
Exactly.
whereas this felt elevated in a way that it felt very, like, grounded and natural and almost, like, classical.
Yeah, without being that, like, suffocating, like, "All right, like, this paragraph's going on too long. You're
Yeah.
really trying to
Mhm.
really
I
hurt
think
yourself."
even
V. Schwab.
another girl at book club, she was like, "I don't like it when I'm reading and I don't, like, know all the words, like, the vocabulary is more intense." And she was like, "But I found it more comforting in this one."
Yeah, it's crazy how she, like, was able to be nuanced with that. Alright, let's jump
Yes.
into what the hell genre this book is. So this was presented, I think, on Goodreads as a fantasy,
Well,
and
I
a
don't
lot
know
of
if it was
people
presented. I think we were just lied to.
I remember seeing it on like, Best of Fantasy Books last year. Um,
That's what I thought too, but then I Googled it,
and
and
then I did
Goodreads.
on Goodreads too, and it's
Yeah.
categorized as historical fiction, which we all were like, "Yeah, duh," and magical realism because there is some sort of nature-esque thing.
Yeah, it's like got, like, supernatural as, like, its 3rd
Yeah.
thing.
So,
But,
if
like,
you're looking for this fantasy story, this is not it. I
no.
would say, if anything, there's a splash, a little drop of magical realism, but this is really a generational story.
Yeah.
It's historical fiction, people. Okay, it's historical fiction, but
Yes.
not in the way that, like, I don't know, not in the way that, like, it feels like historical fiction. Like, it is a fantastical story. Like, these women are on this, like, self-discovery um mission for themselves, but there's no fantasy elements.
No, well, and I don't think it has any, like, plotting or genre conventions of fantasy either. I think it has, like, a coy nature in which it
It's
exists
whimsy.
around magic, but they don't say the word witch.
No.
They don't say the word magic. There you can tell that it's like almost as if it's always hinting at it, which is why I like the word coy to describe the fantasy in this, because it's there, but it's almost like a slight glow
It
around the
yeah,
story.
it's never part of the, like, coming into your power, whatever, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
there's times where people put, like, spells on each other, or, like, someone gets lost in the book and, like, nature comes through and, like, guides her home. So, like, that would be the extent of the magic, but there's no
Yeah.
magic. Anyway, so wanted
We
to
we
say
say that because it was marketed to us,
us.
especially through book club, as if it was going to be a fantasy story. And I do think I did see it. I mean, they talk about it being a witchy story and stuff like that, but I think it's one that if you just go into it knowing that this is a character-driven plot and it deals more about, like, feminist themes than it does anything else, really.
Yeah,
I think that would, like, shape your expectations getting into reading because I struggled through the first half of this because I kept waiting for, like, the hat to drop and the magic to come, and, like,
never
especially
did.
with Kate, the 2019 character story, I was like, "Ugh, and now she finds out she's a witch, and now she's gonna find out she's a
Yeah,
witch."
I know.
And then it's just it does, like, kind of eventually happen, that's not really a spoiler,
Yeah,
but, like, it's so much more, like, tamed and held back than if you're going into expecting fantastical things.
exactly. Yeah, yep. All right. So, with that being said, we're talking about different pacing struggles, genre, writing style, our own feelings reading some of the triggering scenes in this book. What are we rating this? Aubrey, what?
You go first.
Of course, you want me to go first. I knew it. So I rated this 4.5, and then on Goodreads I rounded up to 5. I really
Yeah,
loved this book. I loved the theming of this book. I loved the setting. The setting of this book is amazing.
it's so
I
good.
felt empowered reading this book. And I also felt triggered and sad. And I think that's the point. I think it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, and it
Yeah.
also made me think as a woman, what do I deserve? What do I want in life? And also, who has come before me? What lessons can I learn from them and incorporate in my own life? Because generational trauma is such a real thing everyone deals with. And I think by Emilia Hart setting this in this more whimsical setting in the whole like, oh, my great grandmother was a in the witch trials or whatever
Yeah,
was
yeah.
convicted as whatever. I think it takes some pressure off of it and doesn't make it such like a deep cutthroat story, but at the
Mhm.
same time it has those layers that you're like, damn, like that when you finish this book, at least for me, like it sat with me. And definitely a book post reading you appreciate the whole story. So
Yeah,
I
I think this is one that's gonna grow.
yeah, I can't necessarily say I give it a full 5 stars. Like it's my favorite book, top 5 ever. But I really think Amelia Hart deserves her flowers with this being her debut novel, and that because I don't like multiple POV stories and I don't like character driven stories most of the time, like she did it and she deserved
Yeah.
it. So
Yes. I absolutely agree that I think Amelia Hart deserves all of her flowers, which is why I am not rating this book.
you're not reading
I
it?
I've decided at first I was just going to wait and I was going to let like my thoughts sit and see where I felt like I should put it. But I have just been wrestling with my feelings
Yeah.
towards this book so much that if I'm thinking about, okay, enjoyment, I don't know if I enjoyed reading this book.
Yeah.
If I think about what Amelia Hart brought to the story, I mean, 5 stars, right? And so I was like, I don't think I can, in good conscience, rate this book
Mhm.
because I think it deserves 5 stars. I think the story that is here is so wonderful.
Right.
It didn't hit for me, but then also you're thinking, "Okay, but star ratings are personal." Like, it is about I
Yeah.
mean, we here at Hardcover Podcast always try to rate books in their genre, and so I will have like, funny story, I gave 5 stars. That doesn't mean it hit to me the same way that, like, Words of Radiance, Brandon Sanderson's 5-star read did, but
Right.
for a romance, I was like, "This is fucking amazing." And but so like so I don't know, I just felt so complex about it. This book triggered me in a way I have not been triggered before because of these topics, and I think and it's something that we can get into more in the spoiler section. But the one character I just saw so much of myself in that her chapters became unreadable.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stomach it. It almost made me throw up. And what does that mean for Amelia Hart? To be so good of an author, to represent a situation so well that a friend of ours at book club who I know went through something similar said that she felt it was almost healing to read that and to see that handled with such care and love. And then on the flip side, for me to have this reaction, I'm like, it's just such an incredible story. You know that it's so meaningful what's in here. However, I couldn't do it. I think
Yeah.
if I didn't read it for a book club, I would have DNF'd it
Yeah,
and would have just
absolutely.
said it's not for me. So I don't know. I just feel so topsy turvy with this story. Like thinking about it, I think it's one that next year I'm going to appreciate more. And the year after that, I'm going to appreciate more. And I'm glad that I was kind of forced to finish it because there's some like very beautiful things in here. I just,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's one of those things like I used to be really into like different historical eras and stuff, and I got so
Hmm.
deep into learning about certain topics that it actually like consumed me, and it
Yeah.
made me a depressed sad person, and it maybe hit triggers that I didn't like fully like realize that became triggers throughout my life.
Yeah.
And it's not until years later I look back and I'm like, I can look at it without this like cloud over top of me, and I can
Mhm.
see like, oh wow, that added such perspective to me in my own life, hearing about other people's stories. And so, yeah, I definitely think it's a slow burn book.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that people at our book club, because this is a book club book, we're able to find some peace and comforting in
Mhm.
these women's stories. And also, there's happy endings um,
Yes.
to this book,
Which is amazing.
which is amazing.
Oh, before we move on though, because I did not rate it, I wanted to share one of our girls from book club's review because I think it was very impactful and she had the feelings towards the book that I wish I had. Like I'm jealous that I didn't love it as much as everyone
All right,
else.
though. Yeah.
But this is Taylor.
Love
She's a
Taylor.
girl from book club. 5 stars, obviously, since we gave it. Can you imagine if I'm like, I'm gonna read someone's 1-star
One
review on the
star review.
podcast?
Yeah.
Taylor said, "Words cannot adequately describe how much I loved this book. The prose is well-written love letter to nature and the story perfectly encapsulates both the beauty and burden of womanhood. Each character faces challenges unique to their time period with a common thread of persistent misogyny despite the passage of time. It's a call to action to be true to yourself and your innate power. A particularly poignant read given the current political climate. The quote at the end of the epilogue really stuck with me, which says, "The connections between and among women are the most feared, the most problematic, and the most potentially transforming force on the planet. Loved reading this for November with my community of book club girls."
It is such a great girl book. It really is. It
Yeah.
surprised me how much it was. And Taylor like put literally everything we've talked about in such a like eloquent
Consent, yes. I asked her, I was like,
way.
"Can I read your review on the book on the podcast?"
Yeah, we love Taylor. And she's also a fellow fantasy girly. So I'm
Yes.
happy that like we're seeing that eye to eye. Like, yes, sometimes it could be fantasy, it's not, but we still liked it. So it came through. So without further ado, thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, Peyton.
Thank you,
We are
Peyton.
going to move on to our spoiler section.
Yes.
So if you're ready to discuss this further with us, we're going to jump into it now.
Let's
Okay, so we
go.
have a bunch of different topics, and I figured we
Yes.
have three different characters we're dealing with. So I tried to break my thoughts up a little bit, and we can bop
Mhm.
around, have fun, and figure it all out. So the theming. Let's talk about some
Yes.
specific things about the book around this theming. We have, uh, which I mentioned before in the NS section, we have elements of feminism, we have the nature and magic area, and then the generational trauma, of course.
Yes.
So this book, every character is heavily affected by men in every aspect of their lives, and it's
Yeah.
this lineage of women that really
Mhm.
say fuck the patriarchy. And I gotta say, it was really empowering as a woman in the 21st century to be like, yeah,
Yeah. You know
right.
what? Fuck the patriarchy. Thank you, Taylor Swift. No.
Thanks, T. Yeah,
I yeah, I agree. I think we talked about it some at book club, but and it was in Taylor's review, today's day and age. Like reading this book in November after Donald Trump got reelected, after we see all of these sex offenders being chosen for his cabinet, the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and like this like fact that it feels very hard to be a woman, to then read this book and see it's not good that women were struggling in the 1600s or the 1940s and such, but to see them overcome, like Peyton said, that this has a happy ending,
yeah,
and to see like, hey, women have always faced this shit and they have pursued, they have continued, and there is another end, there is a happy ending,
yeah,
was like really like what you needed right now. You needed someone to be like, it's been bad before,
yeah,
kind of very similar to Kamala Harris's speech where she was like, in the darkness there were stars. She said it way more eloquently, but
Yeah, she did. It was really beautiful. I
she
know
really
exactly
did.
what you're talking about, yeah.
But, like that feminism right now is, like it was hard it was so hard to
Probably
read in the
made it a
beginning.
harder read for all of us too, like,
Yeah,
yeah,
but I think it gives a more meaningful conclusion.
yeah, you're like, "You know what? We're witches anyways,
We're
so
witches
we're
anyways.
witches anyways." So,
Oh.
yeah, so I love how this novel, like, this book explored those different dynamics, and then the empowerment that came from all that horrible stuff. What what character out of the three of them
Mhm.
really like embraced that like feminist power?
My lesbian Alpha.
The matriarch of the
The
family.
matriarch. No, honestly, I love Alpha, but she was just kinda like,
Okay.
doesn't everyone like their best friend more than the men? Like, I'm
That was
confused.
so yeah, that was yeah.
Uh, Violet.
Yeah, I think Violet. Yeah.
Violet's story is really cool because now that we're in the spoiler section, when you're in her head, when you're in her POV, you're in like her darkest hours. I mean, her story is really about being sheltered and not knowing much about the world and her
Her
having
body.
a horrible father, and then her cousin comes to town and
Sexually
a word
assaulted.
that we're
Yeah.
yeah, sexually assault. I was gonna say I can't say the other one on
Yeah.
the
SA.
platform.
Yeah.
Um, and then her, her dealing with the aftermath of that. Like, that's horrible. Like I said, her chapters to me were unreadable. But what was wild and where I think like the talent of the book lies is then we'd get to Kate's POV. And Kate is Violet's great niece, and Kate is in the house that Violet then lived in and looking at Violet's life after that moment. And she's
Yeah.
looking at Violet and she's like, "Oh, she was a scientist who traveled the world. She was like a feminist. She was independent. She had these cool clothes and this house and this amazing life." And and Kate keeps thinking, "I wish I could just be strong like Violet." And isn't that fucking amazing?
Yeah. Especially since we know everything Violet went through.
Yeah, like, we're
Yeah.
experiencing that with Violet, and then Kate's just like, "I love this woman."
Yeah, I know, and it's like, wow, like, the fact Violet gets to be that and there's even a part in the book where Violet's like, "I see so much of myself in this, like, little girl." And then we
Yeah.
figure out, like, how Violet went to go protect her at the end, blah, 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 and we kinda get that, like,
Mhm.
full wrap up in the story, but the
Yeah.
Violet story, I think, is, like we get the historical beginnings with Alpha. We get the modern day, so like present day discovery with Kate. But Violet's really the anchor of this book that
Yeah.
really just because it was her cottage like the Weyward cottage last, I think
Mhm.
that that's Kate's closest connection to that family and
Yeah.
like understanding the lineage and all of that. I think it just hits closer to home. But I love that she made the character Alpha because it really makes it a generational story that's just
Mhm.
like, well, why did Violet really care about science and nature? And like it just made it a full rounded cooked book.
Cooked.
It was
She really cooked on this one.
she really
Yeah.
cooked that up.
Well, and the fact that Alpha's POV is the manuscript letters that
Love.
Violet and Kate read, and it, like, pushed them on their character arc, like, it pushed me on my character arc,
I
bitch.
know. Love it. Okay,
So
so we love the
beautiful.
feminism in this story. I think it was
Love it.
tastefully done. Um, Loved it. All right, nature and the magical element. So these three
Mhm.
ladies have a deep, deep connection with environment. Actually, so much
Yeah.
so that is it Kate that like tries to like not connect with nature because she's really
Yeah.
drawn to it, but we know that she saw the crow flying. or raven, whatever, flying, and that's what inevitably what she thinks killed her dad when he got hit
Mhm.
by the car. So she like that's the discovery for her while reading is like, wait, that's right, I have felt this connection to nature. Whereas Alpha and Violet just automatically were just like
Always
obsessed with it.
yeah.
So it was kind of cool to see her be like, "What? Why is that bird still here? Like, go away!" And like
Get
that
the
was
fuck out of my chimney.
yeah, that's the like quirky nature, magical
Uh-huh.
realism element that I really liked. At one point, Kate is pregnant, we find out in this book,
Mhm.
by her abuser and decides to keep it from him to live a new life. And she goes to Violet's, basically to go confront Violet's abuser. And she runs away and crashes her car. You've read the book, you know what's up. And she's in the snow,
Mhm.
pregnant, isn't feeling her kid kick, and she has to walk back. And this is where that magical realism steps in. These animals come and guide her back to the cottage, where she can be safe again. So that's that connection, and where Kate really just like connected with nature. And I
Yeah,
just
like
love,
the
I think we
imagery of
ended the chapter before, like while it was happening, and we're like, this is when the nature's gonna kick in. And did I think it was gonna be more magical? Yes. Was it? No. But that's okay.
no, I think the magic in the book was exactly where it should have been for this story.
I agree.
I just like fantasy, y'all.
We just like fantasy.
I just love some witches.
I think if it would have been more magical, I don't think the theming of this book would have hit as hard. And I
No,
really
because it
like that it
was
was this
so
naturalistic magic
yeah.
than this just like tried and true fantasy book.
Yeah, like, besides their kind of, like, animal control, which they all have a little moment, I'd say that's the only, like, fantasy bit in here is when they're controlling the animals, but, like, looking at Alpha's story, she, like, creating the abortion tonic, like, that's just, like, what
Herbs.
women did.
Yeah,
Like, that's just, like, a genuine thing
it's just like
that
oils
happened,
and
and
plants and
yeah.
all that.
Uh
Yeah.
Oh, also speaking of Alpha real quick, another thing that our girl Taylor said, that I really loved is that looking at Alpha's story, you could see there was a subversion in the standard witch trial because typically when we're looking at the witch trials, we're looking at it through a lens of like violence against women. And in the real world, these women were just innocent women who died and it was painful and they got charged for crimes that they didn't commit,
Right.
right? So it was a bit of escapism and almost relief in a story that is so heavy in other places
Right.
that for us, instead, it was subversion because Alpha was guilty. She did murder the man and she just got away with it. Like
Yeah.
she got off scotch clean. Like that was such a nice like moment of reprieve in such a heavy story to be like, you
Absolutely.
know what?
Like
She's
tequila moment.
guilty
Yeah.
and she's getting away. I support women's wrongs
Yes,
kind of moment.
absolutely. Yes. Okay, so moving to the generational trauma theme,
Yes.
this is the thing. Every character was impacted by generational trauma without knowing it
Mhm.
until they found themselves alone in the Wayward cottage and discovered the women before them and realized and clicked those pieces together of, oh, something's
Yeah.
wrong. So I kind of, in this book, we realize that every character inherits this sort of pain and suffering from the generation above. Like every woman has dealt with the same sort of topics in their own right. And through that pain comes an immense amount of healing for each of those women. And so when the next woman comes into the cottage and is going through those horrible, horrendous things, and they discover the stories of who has come before them, that's when they start the healing process. And I just think it was quite beautiful to see, especially with Kate, her reading about
Mhm.
Alpha and Violet's story and understanding and not hating herself for what's happened, but accepting it and healing with it, and then standing up for herself.
Yeah.
Because she is a modern age woman at this point in 2019, life in the world does look a little bit different. Unfortunately, it men don't act different. Um,
Yeah.
Go figure. But I really, it really sucked to know that, oh, here comes another woman who's going to inherit this horrible pain and suffering of the wayward line. Like, it was like hard to read, but I also
Yeah.
love to see that through that pain and suffering came so much healing and self-discovery, especially for someone like Kate.
Well, and I don't know if like the 3 women that we focused on had that pain and suffering and had that, kind of trauma that helped one another heal. But I don't know if that's like a necessarily a feature of the Wayward line because which was a concern of mine. I
Like,
was
are they
really
cursed?
concerned
Yeah.
that the women were going to have to go through that in order to unlock their magic. Like, the
Oh,
magic only came at that cost, which is not what happened.
no.
Because I think that, like, I mean, what's her name? Janine or whatever, Alpha's mom didn't have, like, any violence done to her. Alpha didn't have particularly violence done to specifically her. It was just in and around her. Um, I don't know what I was saying there.
I mean,
But
she was almost convicted as a
yes,
and
yeah,
died.
I mean, the
Like,
man put her on trial and such,
yeah.
yes. Yeah,
Um,
she went through it, and even, like, when they stripped her bare in the trial, like, courtrooms and like that, nauseating.
yeah,
But
and like not trusting her because of who her mother was. And it's just like
yeah.
this stamp on, oh, you do that, so you're this person, like those that labeling that
Mhm.
like affected her obviously so much, the fact that she was this like recluse that had to like sneak around town and like couldn't be
Yeah.
seen, and like oh my goodness, that was really hard to read. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy that it's like, they don't all face this trauma because they're waywards, they all
right,
face this trauma because
they're women.
there's men.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, and I think about that sometimes, what has my mom gone through? What has my grandma gone through? What has my great grandma, like, and not because of who we are, but because of who men around us are, what
are.
men
Yep.
have continued to get away with, and it's
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the
wild.
generational trauma through this is her
Mhm.
realizing this isn't a curse on me and my family. This is
Yeah.
just the way men are. And like, yeah. And so
Mhm.
I'm not by any means putting all men into one category, but this is
No.
just a reflection on society's view of a woman, right? With like Alpha's
Yeah.
story and her mother's doings and her doings. With
Well
Violet, it's the time period of,
mhm.
you need to marry for wealth. Shut up. Like, I don't trust what you're saying. Like, you're just like your mother, right? Like, her dad was
Mhm.
really the abuser in that situation. And then with Kate, we have her and her, they're not married.
No.
Her baby daddy, whatever, stupid ass boyfriend. And he is the bad one. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of funny to see it go from like the world, like the society, the town sucks, to my
The
dad, to
individual.
my partner. Like that,
Yeah.
like funnel down to Kate. That is an incredible way of looking at the generational trauma. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, anyways, I think that was just incredibly like to reflect on how that went from like this broad, the witch
Mhm.
trials to down to two people. Um,
Yeah, and it kinda shows how the hate against women is more hidden now.
yeah,
Like, no one was trying to pretend, and I saw a TikTok about this earlier, like, back in the 1600s, they just say, "Women are inferior." Like, the hate was very, like, it was worse for the woman because it was allowed to be loud,
right.
but it was just so loud, and now it's like today's day and age, like, the hate is still so strong, but they're just lying about it.
Yeah.
And it makes it so that way you think you can trust someone and then you can't. And there are men in this book who are good. I mean, Graham, Violet's
Violet's
brother,
brother,
is really good. I
like
think
Grim
Adam Bainbridge, Alpha's baby daddy, like, he just had a crush on a lesbian. That wasn't his fault. You know what I mean? Like, and, like, I think that also goes to show that, like, men can kind of choose. Like, you don't have to be this perpetrator, but that doesn't erase the fact that there are so many who are. That so many women in book club who speak watching this video, have experienced violence, and
yeah.
that's
Not
such a
something.
sad fact, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
when the Me Too movement was going on or, like, even now, like, it is insane how many women have gone through shit and not only just kept silent about it, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many, you don't even know their stories because it happened when they were young, because they whatever, like, it's
and the way that it shapes us into the people we are today, and instead of being like,
Mhm.
"Oh, wow, she's gone through a lot in life," she's just labeled as, like, a bitch. It's like,
Yeah.
"Alright, well, you don't know everyone's backgrounds." So, with that being said, these
Ugh.
characters, these stories, we went through them a lot,
Mhm.
okay, I'm gonna look at some things. We kind of talked about which character had the most compelling arc. I believe that we kind of agreed on Violet's story because hers is
Yes.
the most kind of rooted. I think between
Mhm.
kind of connecting the dots between Kate and Alpha. I think um Alpha's was the most interesting to read. I don't want to say fun,
Yeah.
because none of this was fun.
None of it was fun, but it was the most, like, taking back, like, especially if you're someone who
Storytelling,
wants that
maybe.
fantasy,
Yeah, like
going
the
back to the
vibe.
1600s, doing that,
Alpha's was, yeah, like when you would open up like a Grimm's Brothers storybook of like, or like
Mhm.
when we read The Crucible in school growing
Yeah.
up. And so like obviously it's sad that this happened, but like people go to Salem for a reason. They go there for
Yeah.
vacation because it's like fun and it's witchy and like obviously it's rooted in some heinous shit. Um, but I don't know. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
we could talk more about that one day, but I don't know, I feel like Alpha's story
Yeah.
was more interesting and that, like, yeah,
Mhm.
that fantasy element kinda brought
Yeah.
it in, whereas Violet and Kate's were like, "Ugh," like,
Yeah, well,
well,
they felt more personal because, like, I mean, Kate is in 2019, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he finds her because of her email, like,
right,
you know
exactly.
what y crazy, crazy, crazy. I do think Kate had, like, a very I don't know how to describe it, like, I think Kate's story felt the most pointed in terms of, like, this is a modern woman. This
Yeah,
is our time, and this is like, there was less of that escape with her.
right. Exactly. Yeah, no, like, that's, like, spot on. Yeah, it hurt more to read because it felt like a best friend.
Mhm.
Felt like someone at book club. You know what I mean? Like it felt like
Yeah.
someone who was in our circle, whereas, Alpha like can't really relate to her time period, right?
Yeah.
Um all right, so favorite, so Violet and her character in general is my favorite. Like I said, I liked reading Alpha's story more because there was more of the
Mhm.
escapism into it. It felt more of like a s- story instead of like a story. A
Yeah.
story instead of a story. Um, uh, Character wise, who is your favorite? Who did you enjoy reading the most?
I enjoyed Alpha's the most, and I think I just liked Alpha's the I think Violet was too hard for me,
Yeah, no,
and
I
I
definitely
think
get that.
I loved I know I keep bringing it up, like, funnily, but I do think that, like, the fact that Amelia was not shy about the fact that Alpha was a lesbian, like,
Yeah,
she's like, "I had sex with him, and I was thinking about Grace," and then she was like, "Grace, my lover, I can't wait to hold her." Like, in the
I love it.
1600s to be, like, that loud about it, I'm like, Good job.
love and the first person and like
Yeah.
and also because we're not reading Alpha's point of view when she's like 60. We're reading it when
Yeah.
she's a young girl and Violet's when she's a young girl, and Kate's
Mhm.
when she's I'm not they're all obviously women, but like young women when they're young
Yeah.
women. Yeah, I think that was really interesting. All right, what do we think like this book was missing? Like when you were done reading, it, you're like, I want more of this, or I needed less of that, or I wish. I think there's a couple things that I can think
Yeah.
of, but also I did
Well,
rate it 4.5 stars, so, like, I don't you know?
something to talk about that I think kind of fits in this is how did you feel about the epilogue?
Okay, so
Because a
that's what I think
lot
was missing.
yes, I was gonna say a lot of the girls at book club, I know you weren't there for the last meeting, hated the epilogue.
I
So,
thought
the epilogue for a refresher
was missing.
is Violet's POV in 2018, right before she dies, and kind of Violet's perspective of her relationship with Kate.
Yeah, I think there's no excuse. There's there's no excuse for her not to build that relationship. Like, there the epilogue fell so flat in this book.
Yeah.
It needed more. Like, what do you mean? Like, you just couldn't bring yourself to go to? What are you talking about? You're Violet. Like, you are Violet Wayward. Get your ass in there and like give that girl some love. Like, I just think she like the Violet we read about and the Violet we came to know of this like scientist woman, like extraordinaire person, a little sassy, a little
Yeah.
on edge. Like, where was that when like this young girl needed you and you knew what happened? Like, you could have saved Kate a lot of pain and suffering by being like, "Hey, I was there." You know what I mean?
It was
Like, what the frick?
I mean, I don't know.
What did the girls say?
Listen,
What were they
okay.
pissed off about?
Well, I like, they all were just felt like it was unnecessary. Like,
Yeah,
at that point, it was just weird, and I think it made the story more confusing, and I will say, if it was trying to, like, kind of humanize Violet more and be like, "Hey, just because she got great didn't mean that, like, she wasn't still human," that's one thing, I don't know. But the whole dad situation is what really fucks me up, is she saw Violet dying I mean, Kate Violet saw Kate dying in a car crash. And so she goes to prevent the car crash, and in trying to get Kate out of the way, she witnesses Kate's dad shove Kate out of the way and die. And in that moment, Violet has the realization and was like, "Oh, I never considered that a dad would love their child enough to do that. I never considered that I wouldn't need to save Kate because her dad would save her because Violet didn't have a dad who would save her, right?" That in an idea is great. But then for Violet to then take the guilt and think that she killed Kate's dad, like, that didn't make any sense. Like, that just doesn't make sense, and I no
it's like a
one at
whole
book
other
club
book.
could understand. Like, why like, if in the moment she has the realization that Kate's dad did it because he loved his daughter so much, and that is also Kate's arc, is, like, Kate at the end forgives herself because she thinks she kills her dad. Why did Violet then think that she killed her Kate's dad? Like, why did I like, that's like a regression at that
It's like
point.
when someone's like, "No, I shouldn't have said that." It's like, "No, you can say what you need like you did it was kind for you to say that. Like stop trying to make me feel like
Yeah.
I have to comfort you now that you feel guilty because you kind of
Yeah,
it
it
was
was
so
strange.
unnecessary. It just wasn't.
And I think the epilogue could have so much better benefited from a moment where we kind of enter our final perspective, which is if it would have shifted into omniscient or second person and it would have spoken to you, the reader,
Yeah.
and been like, look at how Alpha and Violet and Kate's stories matter. Look at how they intertwine. Look at the messages
The
of the
theming
book.
we
Like,
were
I
talking
think
about. Yeah.
that would have been an amazing epilogue, and to instead get this weird messiness in the last 3
I
pages.
know, it's like, "Oh, come on." Yeah, I was like, "What? No, I didn't read that because the book
Yeah.
ended on, like, such a good quote, and, like, it was
Yeah.
that is definitely what the book was missing. We could say magic, but really, I don't really feel like this book really needs
Yeah,
magic,
no, I think it
but
did, yeah.
yeah, so yes, that's what I definitely agree with all of that. We're on the same page there. Um, all right.
Do you have
Anything?
anything else that it was missing?
No, that was literally. I was like,
No?
that was probably the only thing.
We're synced. I have a quote from it that I wanna share before we wrap up here. I have 2 here that I highlighted, and I think that there is many more in the book. I loved the end quote that I read earlier that was in Taylor's thing. Um, in the 35% mark, because I don't have page numbers, it says, "Often it seemed that all he cared about was whether or not he could mold her into something pretty and agreeable, a present to be given away to some other man." That was like a painful quote.
A
That was like a
Defining.
yeah, a like a and that was from Violet's POV, of course. But, the other quote that I have that I feel like hits this, like, nature and, like, comforting feeling that the book has, is, "If I must depart this life, I thought, let me live on in the soil. Let me feed the earthworms, nor nourish the roots of the trees like my mother and her mother before her."
I love that one. And also, that is just an example of Amelia Hart's.
Prose,
Yeah, like
everything, like, all like, the themes we said of
imagery.
feminist, generational, and, nature are all present in that.
Also,
Beautiful.
totally side point. I keep on saying Amelia Hart, and I'm like, I feel like I'm saying it wrong because I keep on thinking of Amelia Earhart.
I know, me too.
I'm like, wait, why do I feel like I'm saying like is that her name?
And I fucked it up? Yeah, no.
Oh, I just want to like, that was like my ADHD thought of the episode. I'm like, I just came up with Amelia Earhart,
You're
like
like,
another incredible woman.
yes.
God rest her soul. Okay.
Well, they found her, in case you didn't know, because they
Okay,
just thought she was a man all this time. Fucking sexist men. Fuck the patriarchy.
guys. Fuck the patriarchy, everyone. All right. With that being said, we have a ton of other book reviews on the podcast. So
Yes.
give those a listen. I'm sure there's books on there you have read or want to read. Like I said, we always do an NS section at the beginning of our episode. So if you see a book review that you're interested in, give it a listen for a little bit to see if you
Listen.
want to pick up the book. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. I looked last night. Like we are like less than 10 away. So please like,
Mind-blowing.
subscribe. This is a huge milestone to end out 2024 on. We love you guys
Yes.
so much. So please like, subscribe. We are a hardcover podcast on all platforms. We are not only on YouTube, we're on Spotify and Apple Music.
Yes. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us, and happy reading.